Let's get started. So thank you again for joining us today. My name is Erin Daly, and on behalf of Everbridge, I'm excited to present this Expert Insights webinar, Identifying and Responding to Threats Using Risk Assessment to Improve Resiliency. In this webinar, our presenters will examine the importance of leveraging critical threat data, monitoring threats, avoiding risk escalation and communication, and workforce mobility and threat response. After the session, we will have a 15-minute Q&A session with our speakers. So just as a reminder, you can submit your questions at any time during the webinar. You may send your questions by typing in the open text field in the questions panel and sending your question to all panelists. If time runs out before your question is asked, we will try to follow up with you after the webinar. Links to the recording of the webinar and slides from today's presentation will be available on our blog within a few days of today's session. You can also look for a link to recordings for all of our webinars on everbridge.com under our resources section. If you're on Twitter, we encourage you to take a moment to follow us at Everbridge and use the webinar hashtags #Everbridge and #ThreatView to share snippets of insight throughout our program with your followers. We'll even retweet some of your comments. And now I'd like to introduce you to our speakers. From NC4, we have Eric Hankins, CTE Senior Director, Travel Risk Solutions. Eric has more than 15 years experience in the design and development of tools to apply global risk analysis and real-time intelligence to corporate security and duty of care missions. This experience spans enterprise policy all the way down to the experience of the individual traveler. He currently heads NC4's efforts to create and deliver solutions to meet the needs of its customers in the corporate security, risk management, business continuity, supply chain management, and corporate travel markets. Prior to his current position, Hankins was the Chief Operating Officer and the Principal Architect of Traveler Tracking Solutions at TransSecure, Inc., the oldest continually operating global security intelligence provider in the United States. After NC4 acquired the assets of TransSecure in January 2010, Hankins assisted in incorporating TransSecure's traveler tracking technology into NC4's flagship global all-hazard safety and security asset tracking platform, NC4 Risk Center with Active Travel. Throughout his career, Hankins has worked closely with thought leaders in international corporate security and business travel management, gaining a deep understanding of the industry's pressing need for timely, targeted intelligence and the technologies necessary to collect and deliver it. Hankins holds a BA from the University of Maryland and is a Microsoft Certified Solution Developer and Systems Engineer, as well as a GBTA Certified Travel Expert. He is currently serving on the Global Business Travel Association's Technology Committee. After NC4's presentation, we will be hearing from Megan Hounshaw, Product Manager of Mobile, Social, and Web Solutions at Everbridge. Megan has spent 7 years working in the critical communication industry and has most recently managed the rollout of the integration between NC4 Risk Center information and the Everbridge product suite. We are excited and honored to have all of our speakers here with us today. And now, without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Eric. You may begin.
Thanks, Erin. So as you can see from the title slide here, what I'm going to talk about to you guys today is how do you identify and respond to threats, and really focus in on incident monitoring as the key component of your operational risk management process. Excuse me. So obviously risk assessments and risk management plans are crucial to every organization, but as a part of that package, incident monitoring is a key component, vital component of any process. It's something that we specialize in at NC4. It's something that we've been doing for the last 10 years. It's pretty much our major operating principle. What we deliver is highly focused, highly targeted, and very timely incident monitoring data. So what you get out of this is improved risk visibility. And what that allows you to do is really understand what the global threat picture means to your organization and your assets around the world. You can really talk about threat and risk as two distinct things. You've got threats all around the world, things that are happening, things that pose danger to your assets, to your operation, to your business continuity. And then you've got risks. What risk means is essentially how do those threats pertain to you specifically. There are lots of threats out there. Not all of them apply to you. You can't watch everything, and you need to really spend your time and resources focusing in on the elements that are specific to you and have a potential impact to you. So that's really the core of understanding your global risk, and incident monitoring plays directly into that. Being able to really get, again, timely and very targeted, relevant incident information is key to that process. Recently, there was a survey by IDC that showed that many business continuity managers out there don't have confidence in these plans that they have. We talked about having these risk assessments and the management plans. Many of these DC directors don't have confidence that these plans are actually going to work in all scenarios. Now, for us at NC4, we've been dealing with these types of people for a long time. This is not a big surprise to us. We understand that in some cases, large organizations don't really want to take the time, spend the money to be proactive from the perspective of planning ahead and managing an effective response. And many times the problem is that these situations evolve. So when you get the first news of something happening, it's rapidly evolving. So as time goes on, the situation changes, and you're reacting in sort of retrospectively to things that are happening. So this is again where incident monitoring is key to the situation. You have to know what's going on. You have to have that full picture so you understand as the situation evolves. In order to do incident monitoring effectively, you got to do a few things. All right, it has to be obviously timely. You need to get your information ahead of time as quickly as possible. The further out ahead of the incident that you can get, obviously, the better you're going to be. You're going to be proactive. You're going to be able to line up your response and do things better. If you can stay ahead of it, in fact, if you can get out in front of the situation, you're going to reduce your impact overall. Okay, so if you get out far enough ahead, you might even be able to avoid it altogether. Another point here is that incidents have to be monitored all the time. Obviously, things are happening all around the world. Threats are out there. They're not limited to business hours, right? You're not working on an 8-hour day, a 10-hour day, a 12-hour day. Things are happening all the time, overnight, on weekends, over holidays. And so if you're going to be doing incident monitoring effectively, you have to be doing it 24/7, 365. Obviously, that's a huge resource investment. So, that's where a company like NC4 would come in. That's the sort of thing that we do. We are constantly watching these things. We're looking at things 24/7 by 365. And we're keeping an eye on everything from very small incidents all the way up to major incidents, which brings me to the next point here. Your incident monitoring has to be comprehensive. You have to be looking at everything, what we call all hazards incident monitoring. So it's not just the big stuff, okay? So there's obviously major weather, there are earthquakes, there are major terrorist events out there in the world. But there's also the stuff that happens right here on the street in front of you. It's water main breaks, it's minor security incidents, it's small fires. All of these things can have an impact on your operation. The real key is where did it happen and how quickly did you find out about it? So that's really crucial to your effective incident monitoring. You've got to be looking at everything. Next point is high quality information. You really need to know when you're getting a piece of information how accurate is this? Where did it come from? What are the sources? And has it been verified? Okay, obviously there's going to be a trade-off, between quality and timeliness. In other words, we want to get things out as quickly as possible. We're doing our 24/7 incident monitoring. We want to make sure the information gets out there, but at the same time, we want to vet it. We want to get multiple sources where we can. We want to understand where the original data came from, and we don't want to put out erroneous information. So that's the balance that we have to strike when getting this information out there. One of the things we came up with early on was a way to manage this sort of balance. So when we get a piece of information, it's early in the process, we'll go ahead and put it out there, and we'll put it out there with a tag of unconfirmed, meaning what we're getting is very early information. It's coming from a potentially unreliable source like a police scanner, for example. Basically, it's not confirmed by a government source or by multiple sources from reliable, reputable media sources. The other key to this is that you need to stay on top of the information so that when there are updates, you can update that information as new information comes along. So, the sort of standard saying in the business is the first report is always wrong. That couldn't be more true. I mean, when you pick up information about something that's happening out in the world, even on major news outlets, by the way, I mean, and of course you can't step outside or turn on your television or turn on your computer without getting blasted by information from all different sources. Even on major outlets, you're going to get that first report because they've got to fill the air. They've got to get that stuff out there. Most of the time, what you're hearing right off the bat is going to be wrong in at least one way or another. So frequent updates are going to be key to improving your accuracy as time goes on. All right, finally, the biggest and most important, I think, aspect of incident monitoring is you have to be looking at what's relevant. So again, this gets back to that question of threat versus risk, right? You've got threats all around the world. You've got a major heap of information coming at you all the time. You're getting information about this stuff. What is relevant to you? What makes something relevant to you is a couple of things. Number one, how likely is it to affect you? If it's, you know, you're in Calgary and somebody's telling you about a hurricane down the Gulf of Mexico, that's a big threat, but it's not very likely to affect you, so not a big risk for you. The other thing is, how close is it to you, right? Is this something that's happening right on top of you or somewhere else? Is it likely to have an impact on you, your operation? So moving into the next slide here, here's a nice way to manage that kind of a thing. This is sort of the model that we operate under. Basically, the idea is giving people the ability to create their own profiles and tell us, you know, as we're doing this incident monitoring or as they're working on their own types of incident monitoring, really hone in on what's important to you. All right, so we're looking at, for the most part, what's happening around key areas, locations of concern. So these can be facilities, these can be traveler locations, this can be your, you know, your offices, your suppliers, whatever it is, manufacturing. And the idea is to set up a system of profiles whereby you can draw concentric rings around these things and really hone in on what's important based on the type of incident, the severity level of the incident, and the proximity to your assets. So basically, we're talking about virtual perimeters here and really tailoring the kind of information and targeted intel that you're going to get back out of your incident monitoring procedures. All right, one of the reasons we really focus in on the relevancy and this sort of profiling mechanism is the idea that minor incidents can have a big impact. Okay, that's a pretty basic point, but it bears some scrutiny here. We talk about you know, all hazards tracking. So I mentioned earlier on we do everything from we're talking about everything from water main breaks, things happening right down on the street level, all the way up to the really big stuff like big weather, earthquakes, you know, terrorism and things like that. But you really need to focus in on that minor stuff because the thing that makes a minor incident a major impact is where it happens. If this is happening right on top of you, it's potentially very bad for business. I got a couple of stories to kind of illustrate that. One goes back to the early days of Risk Center when we were sort of first hashing out this idea of NC4 Risk Center, an incident monitoring service. Excuse me. And a lot of the idea here came out of a conversation that Carl, one of our VPs, was having with a business continuity manager at a major investment bank. And the story that this fellow told was that he had lost over $10 million in revenue due to one of these tiny little incidents, a water main break. The key there was that the break happened on a Saturday afternoon. Nobody's in the office. Nobody's paying attention to this stuff. And it was right down the street from one of their key facilities. And what happened was the water came in, flooded the basement, and ended up taking out an electrical transformer and bringing down an entire foreign currency trading system. So at that point, IT became aware of the incident, but really at that point it was too late because when the Asian financial markets opened on Sunday, they were unprepared. The systems were down. They were unprepared to process these transactions, and they ended up having to send a ton of business to their competitors. So basically what ended up happening was without early warning, without this you know, on-the-street situational awareness about this minor incident, they ended up losing, you know, over $10 million, and that's a situation that could have been prevented by better incident monitoring. Another good example is in the telecommunications industry. We deal with a lot of these major wireless operators, and they maintain these networks, and most of their networks, most of their locations and these nodes on the networks are these unmanned switching stations, and these are, you know, these are the hardware that really controls the entire network. So in this case, you know, a minor incident right on top of one of these facilities, I mean, literally on the roof of one of these facilities where where the hardware is, can cause these component failures and blow holes in the network and result in, you know, loss of traffic, drop of signal, and a lot of problems really with customer satisfaction. So really monitoring down to a very precise level, down to the 10th of a mile even, to get you into a position where you can get early warning of these kind of incidents is absolutely critical. That's you know, it's really all about staying ahead of the incidents. So obviously, you know, we talked a little bit about minor incidents having a big impact. Of course, the correlator to that is major impact. Yeah, major incidents are going to have a major impact as well. These are the things that are very high profile, very sensational. Two examples include terrorist attacks here in the U.S., like for example, just a year ago, the attacks at the Boston Marathon. Of course, we've had recent incidents like a train station suicide bombing in Russia, terrorist attack at a train station in China. It happens all over the place. It happens, unfortunately, with greater regularity than any of us would like to see. And these things get a lot of media attention. These are very high profile, and of course, they can have major impact. Now we know that just this last week we had the Boston Marathon again. Everything went by fine this time, but of course, looking back, we can see what happens when things don't go so well. And looking back at that for us, this is a good way to illustrate the importance of timely information. So, looking back, the bombs exploded at about 2:50 p.m. Eastern Time, and what we did in response to that was within about 7 minutes, our analysts were able to pick up information about the incident by social media. We do a lot of social media monitoring, and including picking up tweets from the Boston Globe, obviously a well-known and reliable media source. And we were, by virtue of our proprietary tools, we have Twitter monitoring tools that we built ourselves, we were able to pick this information up very quickly, again, within 7 minutes, and then get very, very precise street-level geocode on the incident information that we got and get that out to our customers within 6 minutes of receiving that information. So really, overall, time elapsed between when the incident happened and when we notified our customers about it, 13 minutes. And of course, I mentioned before, keeping track of what's going on with the incident, keeping up to date with all the information that's coming out in the follow-on to the initial incident. We updated this several times throughout the day, keeping track of everything from multiple suspicious package and device incidents around the world, around the area, cell phone disruptions and transportation disruptions, public safety advisories, all the police traffic that was going on. And so the key here in terms of supporting customers and in terms of preventing a negative impact to business is the Boston Marathon is a major sporting event, and we've got the World Cup coming up. It's another example of a similar type of scale here. These things have major corporate sponsorship, and so it's very high profile, and corporate security officials absolutely need to have this information. This is the kind of stuff that really helps them do what they need to do in terms of protecting their assets and protecting their corporate reputation. So just getting into the idea of business impact, really looking at how does incident monitoring help you prevent negative impacts to your business. Well, obviously finding out early about incidents is a huge benefit in terms of managing the impact. If you get out ahead of the incident, you're going to be way better off, you're going to be way better prepared, you're going to have time to reposition your assets, you're going to have time to respond. Whereas if you're coming in after the fact, there may be cases where you don't even know something happened. And that's an interesting story that I can tell right here, very relevant to this particular issue, is back in January of this year, we had just brought on a major retail department store chain as a customer. And I'm not sure if you guys remember this, but right around that time there was a mall shooting here, actually very close to where I live here in Maryland, Columbia, Maryland, and there was a shooting at the mall there. What ended up happening is, in terms of the way we reported it, we got notification back from the business continuity director of the department store chain who had set up his alert profiles to monitor everything going on around his stores. He was notified by an NC4 alert actually before he heard anything about it from his in-store personnel who were at the mall when it happened. And that's not uncommon. That's the kind of story we hear relatively frequently because the folks who are there on the ground are responding to the incident as they should be, and they're doing what they can do to manage the situation on the ground. They're not reporting back to corporate, and corporate therefore is blind about what's going on. So again, key point there is getting good information, relevant information, and timely information is key to managing the business impact. All right, another big point to make there is that disseminating this information and sharing this information around once you get it is crucial. I mean, obviously, if you're not doing anything with the information, what is the point of getting it? And of course, once you know about the incident, and you want to respond quickly, and you need to get that out to all your people. And of course, our friends here at Everbridge have a lot of efficient and rapid solutions for getting that information out as well. All right, another point to look at in terms of managing an incident is the productivity impact. So you may have an incident that happens, and it doesn't necessarily affect your assets directly, or it doesn't necessarily affect your operation. But let's look at something like a shooting or a stabbing at a high school. Unfortunately, we just had another one in the last couple of weeks here in Pennsylvania. Places like data centers, operation centers, that are placed nearby these incidents are staffed by people who may have children in the affected school. So the idea is that, as soon as something like this happens, it's high profile. You can see from the screenshot on the left there, it's breaking news. The information is coming out on local news channels, cable channels, whatever it is. Information is going to get to the people working in the call center. Unfortunately, it's not going to always be the best information or most accurate information. So in this case, providing timely and comprehensive information is a very effective way of managing the impact on your operation, and also sort of managing the personal impact on your people. So if you can tell them, hey, this is what's going on, here's the best information we have right now, here's who may or may not be affected, then you know how to manage it internally, and if you need to, let those people get out to handle it and address the situation on their own. But the important part there is staying ahead of the rumors and getting the most accurate information as quickly as you can. All right, I mentioned we cover all hazards, right? We're covering everything from street level up to major weather, major natural disasters, and of course, that includes everything such as wildfires, earthquakes, floods, tsunamis, hurricanes, tornadoes. We report on hundreds of these types of incidents per year. Earthquakes, from minor quakes that cause minimal damage, all the way up to the major quakes, such as the one recently off the coast of Chile earlier this month, 8.2 magnitude. We also obviously spent a lot of time reporting on the 2011 earthquake in Japan. 9.0 magnitude triggered a tsunami, disastrous, nuclear accident, and of course it had wide-ranging impacts, everything from travel disruptions to business continuity, supply chain disruptions, and basically the point here is that providing a steady stream of reliable information and comprehensive coverage is key to managing and keeping up with all of the incident monitoring details around managing that kind of an incident. All right, many of our customers here, also in the U.S. and around the world, have travel safety and security departments. So we're looking at, I mentioned travel disruption in the context of that the Japan earthquake. But as far as managing safety and security and delivering information to travelers, we get into the concept of duty of care. And that's a key concept, particularly for travel management, but also for sending expats around the world or really managing business around the world in general. Here in the U.S., concept of duty of care is actually an ethical and civil liability, whereas in other countries there are criminal penalties. Basically, the idea here is that it is the corporation's responsibility to provide information to its people, to get the key information to the right people at the right time so that they know what they're heading into, they know what precautions they need to take, and they know what's happening around them at all times. So we certainly help with that kind of a thing. Situational awareness, incident monitoring is key to providing that kind of a service and really delivering on that kind of a duty. Other types of incidents that are going to have a major impact, either at the local level or the global level, are obviously strikes, protests, civil unrest. We report on dozens of these kinds of incidents around the world on a daily basis. Okay, so that can be everything from port strikes to aviation worker strikes to civil unrest. And we talked about earlier minor incidents having a major impact. Even a minor protest can impact your operations. Recently, we had a soft opening for a company called OfficeMax. Everybody knows OfficeMax. They're opening one of their stores in Illinois, and there was a union protest targeting a nearby LA fitness store. So it was nothing to do with OfficeMax. It just happened to be close by. Well, fortunately, by virtue of these social media monitoring tools that I mentioned, we were able to pick up advance notice of this protest and get it out to the right people, and they were able to take the appropriate precautions, deploy security, and really manage the incident that was happening nearby so that it didn't disrupt their business and operations. If you look over here on the right side, you can see an example of a local protest that could have a global impact, economically especially. This is a protest at Foxconn in China, and some of you may recognize the Foxconn name. This is, of course, corporation and manufacturing operation that produces Apple iPads and iPhones, among other things. So, disruption to that operation is going to have a major financial impact for Apple and everybody who loves their product. If you want to see people get upset, you tell them that the Apple iPads that are supposed to come into their Apple store today have been delayed because of a protest, in China. You're going to see an impact there. All right, so another example would be like a major trucking strike. Last year we had a major trucking strike at the Port of Long Beach. Impacts all through the U.S. Another one just last month, a major strike at Port Metro in Vancouver that cut container shipping into Western Canada by 90%. That's a huge economic impact. So really, it's just a way of getting back to the point that the goal of incident monitoring is to stay ahead of these types of incidents, find out as early as possible, and begin your mitigation process as soon as you can, because that's really going to cut the cost down, cost of managing the incident. All right, so what are the takeaways here? We've talked about a lot of stuff. Major points here are really that comprehensive incident monitoring is absolutely critical for risk management. You have to know what's going on. You have to know what's relevant to you because as the number one point here indicates, minor incidents can have a major impact, especially if they're close and they affect you directly. All hazards monitoring is key. You got to know everything that's going on. Again, you can't just overlook little stuff in favor of the sensational stuff that you're seeing on the media. You got to be looking all the time, so you got 24/7, 365 coverage, and you got to get the best quality information possible. Preferably multiple sources, confirmed government sources, confirmed media sources, and make sure you're responding to the situation as it really is. Most importantly, key point is relevancy is critical. You got to make sure you're responding to the right information and avoid this information overload. That's the bane of our existence these days. We've got too much information. We don't know what to do with it all. So focus in, use profiling technology, filter out the noise so that you're only looking at the incidents that are going to have the impact on you and your operations. All right, before I turn it over to Megan here, I just want to point out that NC4 has a broad set of safety and security solutions for the public and private sector. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Risk Center in a minute on the risk management side. That's Risk Center with Active Travel. Active Point is our new GPS tracking app. It's going to be coming out in a couple of weeks. But we also have public safety solutions, and that includes everything from NC4 Street Smart, which is a crime fighting tool, to eSponder and E-Team, which are used for incident management, resource management, tactical emergency management by large city agencies, such as the NYC Department of Emergency Management and the New Jersey State Police. We also have a set of solutions that allow for secure information sharing, sharing of critical information, particularly around cybersecurity and cyber threat mitigation. And that's NC4 Mission Center and ESP. The point in bringing this up, really, at least one key element of this slide, is that these relationships that we have by virtue of these products with public sector entities at the federal, state, and local levels really allows us to have access to great, high-quality incident information that's very timely. So I mentioned I talked a little bit about NC4 Risk Center. Risk Center is basically a tool, a web-based tool that provides your customers with real-time alerting of incidents and focuses on enhancing situational awareness for risk mitigation purposes. So really it's everything we've been talking about here, giving you the best information, the most timely information, and help you determine which of these things that are going on in the world are most relevant to you. Part of this offering that we have is the content that we generate at our what we call our NC4 International Monitoring Centers, of which we have two, one in Virginia, one in California. And these centers are operating continuously 24/7 and have been for the last 8 years, reporting on about 50,000 incidents, unique incidents per year worldwide. So let me switch over here very briefly and give you a look at our situation map. So this is kind of the the heart of the tool. And this is showing you each of these little icons, what's going on in the world, what incidents are being tracked right now by our international monitoring centers. So we've got everything from transportation, infrastructure, fires, security incidents, so all this stuff. We talk about all hazards. Let's go ahead and drill down and look at a couple of these. And for example, we have a bomb threat here, and if we want to drill down and look at that down at the local level, at the street level, you can see where this is going on. I'm not sure if you can read the small text here. But we talked about, reliability information. Right now, this is unconfirmed. This is a new incident that we've been following. And as we get more information, including a confirmation, we'll certainly update that. but this is telling you about a bomb threat that shut down a hospital, okay, on precautionary lockdown. I back out here to the global level again. I can drill down and see a couple more interesting items here. One that we were talking about earlier on just before the call is this explosive device found. This is a World War II era bomb discovered at the Vilnius airport. Right now, as we're looking at it, no flight disruptions, but something we'll be keeping an eye on. It's interesting. I was talking to Carl about this earlier, and he was saying we do about, I didn't realize, we do about one of these a month, one of these a week. This is something that's actually fairly common as, you see here maybe the airport is expanding, or as it says here, there's some mining operations going on nearby. These are being dug up all the time in Europe and in Japan, so lots of unexploded ordnance. Obviously, that could have a major impact if it's not managed correctly. So getting early notice about something like that would help you with, maybe rerouting your travel plans, or if you're doing business there anywhere nearby the airport, maybe going somewhere else to do what you need to do. One other one I wanted to pull up that I thought was kind of interesting is a fire over here. But again, the point is, it's not talking about major global incidents. These are not things that you would hear about if you were to turn on CNN today. Okay, and the fact is, it's not relevant to you if you don't have any operations nearby. But if you do, it could be very important. And this is maybe the kind of situation that's happening right on top of you, and you don't even know it. So getting that advanced, accurate, and very relevant kind of data is critical to managing risk. Okay, and I think with that, I'll go ahead and stop. I'm seeing my time. I'm just about at 30 minutes here, so I'll pass it over to you now.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, so as Eric was just showing us, NC4 does provide safety and security solutions and can definitely identify event provides that critical communication suite. And so together, they can really be a powerful tool to help you plan, assess, and respond to incidents and deliver critical communication during those incidents. So how do we best manage an incident in action? Well, planning. So 31.6% of BCDR professionals don't actually have a documented plan. And as we all know, having a plan is an important part of managing through an event. So here are just a few things that to think about when coming up with a plan. So one thing to think about is how will you know about potential threats? Well, obviously there are services like NC4, and it will be very helpful. The information that NC4 can provide is very helpful. There's also things like social media trending that Eric also talked about. And then also leveraging feedback from your own contacts can also be very helpful in managing those types of events. You also think about what types of threats can affect you. So plan for all different scenarios. Like Eric mentioned, there are minor scenarios or minor incidents that could happen that can affect your business. They can affect your your assets and the individuals that work for and with you. Also, you need to plan for major events. So plan for really any incident that's likely to impact the safety, security, and productivity of your assets. And then also think about how you would respond to those threats. So who's involved, what processes need to be followed, who would be impacted, and then what messages need to be communicated on a particular incident. So communication is really crucial in an incident. And it's very helpful to create messages in advance for a variety of different threat types. And then also we need to be sure that we plan for the unexpected, because we couldn't possibly come up with every type of threat and be prepared for every type of threat or incident that's going to happen. So, but what we can do is plan for the unexpected and understand that if a threat happens that we're not prepared for, what do we do in that situation? So as Eric mentioned, the key to effective response is really understanding potential threats before they impact you. So it's definitely important to have advance notice. This is actually a view of the NC4 interface that Eric was showing you, and I just want to point out that the integration that we're doing with NC4 helps you stay ahead of the incident by quickly navigating to your Everbridge contact database from the NC4 application. So directly from NC4 interface, if you're using them, you can actually navigate directly to the Everbridge system and view that same incident on the map, and that way you'll be able to create your notification directly from that incident and quickly get that information out there to the people who need to know. We also learned that effective incident and threat monitoring needs to have all of these characteristics, right? So one thing that you can do is make sure that your Everbridge organization is set up to alert you when an incident takes place. So if we're monitoring, let Everbridge do the monitoring for you. So you can set up thresholds based on incidents that are coming in from NC4, and you can actually set up a threshold to alert you when something happens. So set up a threshold, create a notification to yourself, to your first responders, or even to individuals who would need to know when a particular incident is happening, and let that notification be triggered automatically when that incident takes place. And that notification can actually kick off your management of that event. We also learned from Eric's presentation that relevancy is key. That's one of the main points here. So you just want to make sure that the thresholds that you do set up are relevant to your particular circumstances. So we need to know, where did it happen and how quickly we find out about it. So just make sure that when you're setting up your thresholds, you focus on severity, location, and type of incident. And you can choose definitely all of the available incidents, or you can drill down to specific incidents if you have messages or you have groups of people that need to be notified for particular situations. You can create individual thresholds that would trigger notifications to those specific individuals, those specific groups or roles in your organization for a particular type of incident. So we also allow you to choose the incident severity for particular thresholds. Also, Eric talked about location and making sure that you set up thresholds for the locations that matter to you, and you're monitoring incidents around those locations. So our thresholds are based on an address and the perimeter around that address. And then, of course, if you've pre-created your messages and you've done your planning, then you can automatically trigger those notifications to be delivered. So let's talk a little bit about some best practices for setting up those thresholds. So setting a smaller radius around your locations for minor or moderate incidents is going to be more relevant to you. So as Eric mentioned, you would want to set 1 mile for minor and 10 miles for moderate incidents. So modify your settings here, choose a severity of moderate or minor, and choose a smaller radius around that location. And then, of course, for major incidents, you'd want to increase your radius. So set 50 miles for severe, 250 for extreme, and take advantage of the configurable threshold settings to ensure that the information you're receiving is relevant to you and your situation. So if you've done your preparation and you are prepared and you have a plan in place and you're monitoring for threats according to the location and the severity and the incident type, and maybe you're even monitoring for all incidents that take place around your location, then you'll be able to make better decisions when that event is taking place. So other things to keep in mind are that you want to ensure that your contact records are up to date. Make sure that the phone numbers are correct and that the individuals in your organization have the right roles and are in the right groups so that you can contact them in the event. Also, take advantage of the geographical information so that you can inform anyone who lives or works near the impacted area. So if a threshold is triggered, then you can view it on your universe map where your contact locations are actually plotted on the map. Draw a polygon and you'll actually be able to send a notification immediately to those people who are in the vicinity of where that incident is taking place. So let's talk a little bit about crafting your messages. So you do need to anticipate as many scenarios as possible, but I do understand that it's impossible to plan for everything. But as much as possible, you want to think about these different scenarios that could potentially impact your assets. So you want to create messages also for the different stages of the event. So what happens when the incident initially takes place? What happens 10 minutes later when you've disseminated first responders to the scene? And you want to make sure you're actually delivering those notifications to the right delivery methods and modes of communication as well. And so you can set up templates in your organization to be prepared for those. And these templates also can be triggered by those thresholds that we've been talking about. And then, of course, planning for the unexpected, like we talked about earlier. So plan to be able to send a message on the fly. Expect the unexpected, and follow that 3-3-30 rule that Dr. Chandler talks about. 3 quick points, 3 brief sentences, and focus on the first 30 words to just make sure that the people who are receiving that message understand immediately what you're trying to tell them. And then, of course, you can build on situational intelligence. So Eric alluded to social media monitoring, and it's definitely a great idea to also monitor social media. And some of the, here's just some screenshots from some social media that we gathered during the Boston Marathon bombing. So these are some Twitter feeds that we were able to monitor in the Everbridge application, and you can really get a good sense of what's going on out there in the public, and you can gather more information very quickly by monitoring for social media during those types of events. And then finally, leverage your own contacts. You have assets, you have people and individuals who are on the ground, may be in the midst of the incident that's happening, and you want to take advantage of their ability to communicate with you. So, take advantage of that mobile member application and, send out polling notifications. They can respond, send back further information with text messages. They can send photos back from the scene. They can send their geographical location. So that two-way communication can help guide the response and gather frontline intelligence. And so that's actually, Erin, I'm ready to pass it back over to you for questions.
Thank you so much, and thank you both Megan and Eric for your presentations. So at this point, we're going to open it up to questions from our audience. So just a reminder, you may submit your questions by typing a question into the open text field in the questions panel on your screen and submitting it to all panelists. And we'll answer as many questions as time allows. And just a reminder, if we're not able to get to your question during this session, we'll do our best to follow up with you separately after the event. So our first question is for, I think, both NC4 and Everbridge. The question is, threats may be miles away from your location, but in proximity to or affect your supply chain. How do you plan for and address that?
Yeah, I can take a shot at that from the NC4 side. So that's a great point. The way we address it from the NC4 side is that we really look at things in terms of points of critical infrastructure, and that can be everything from, as I mentioned earlier, your offices, places where your folks work, the data centers, but also supplier locations and any key elements of your supply chain. So if you build your profile in such a way that you've got all of those locations covered and you've got points to and from and in between covered, then you've got your incident monitoring down, and you're going to get information about what's happening, at every point along that supply chain. So you can stay ahead of it and be as proactive as you can be in terms of addressing anything that happens that might have an impact on any point of that chain.
I agree with that, and I think, too, you can also leverage the mapping components and the GIS capabilities in the Everbridge system to plot those locations on the map. And any key locations that you have are areas that aren't necessarily, office locations or work locations, but they're supply chain locations. Put those on the map as well. And that way you can make sure to contact the individuals that are at those locations or may be affected by something impacting that area.
Great, thank you. So this question is directed at Everbridge, but I think it's probably relevant for NC4 as well. So I'll field it to Megan first and then pass it over to Eric. It is well known that rumors fly and information can be less than reliable on social media. How does the Everbridge interface deal with the vetting of information to avoid confusion for the customer?
Definitely. That is a very excellent question. In fact, over here in Glendale, we had a while back we had a fire, and it was called the Williams fire, and I was monitoring for that in the Everbridge thresholds, and I had a threshold set up for looking for keywords Williams and fire, and I got a lot of very relevant information from that, but I also got some social media tweets that came back that were about how Serena Williams was on fire because she was doing great in in her tennis match, and obviously that wasn't relevant to my situation. But if all I needed to do was set up a perimeter around the area that I was concerned about, so the tweet that was irrelevant to me or erroneous was actually on the East Coast, and if I had simply set a perimeter that said, collect any tweet that comes in within a 5-mile radius of a particular address, then I would not have received that clutter in my information that I'm receiving from the social media feed. So it's really about taking advantage of the configurability of the threshold settings.
Yeah, that's a great illustration of that key point that relevancy is key. You're looking at information that's relevant to you. So if you can filter out stuff right off the bat that isn't relevant based on proximity, then you save yourself a lot of steps. It's not something you even need to look at as a further vetting. In terms of the way we handle that, I think Carl can speak to this a little bit in more detail than I can. But I would say generally that what we do in terms of our social media sources is spend time vetting them, and we don't just take anything from anybody. So we start picking up information from particular sources, and we're a bit conservative about how we use it until we get a better understanding of who these sources are, what their motivations are, where they're reporting from, and what they know. And as we build up a relationship or a level of comfort and experience with individual sources, we add them to our network, and we monitor that way. In terms of handling things like confusing keywords, we have intelligence built into our software, these proprietary tools that I've talked about that really handle that kind of thing. At a very basic level, it's things like a proximity of keywords in a sentence, but it's also looking at sort of linguistic analysis kind of tools too, so that you can see that as Megan was saying, fire, being on fire, and something literally being on fire, that there are keys that you can pick up programmatically. So there's basically computer intelligence that can differentiate between those things. So we try to do a lot of that as well. And again, it's really all about finding out what is relevant. It's taking going from the question of what to so what, right? That's kind of the way we look at it. What is happening? Well, so what? What does it mean to me? And does this even affect me at all? So we try to do it at the first level, in automation, and then the second level is putting the eyes of the analysts on it and really doing that in a way that maximizes our resources.
Great, thank you. So this question is directed at Megan. You spoke in your presentation about two-way communication with contacts. How do we receive information back from our employees, when we know that cell towers become overwhelmed during major incidents?
Yeah, that is a good question as well. So when the cell towers become overwhelmed, it's very hard to make phone calls. Using your phone as an actual device to make a call or receive a call becomes virtually impossible, as we all know, during major incidents, earthquakes or storms. But what we have noticed is that it's easier to receive a text message or an SMS message on your device, and in fact even easier to receive a push notification from a mobile app, because what we'll do is we'll keep trying send that message. And so a phone call, you have to be connected all the time, right? You can't lose connection or the call drops, or you can't place a call if you don't have any connection. But if you're using something like a push notification on, for example, our mobile member application, Everbridge will continue to try to contact the device until that message is delivered. So if there's a 2-second window where that device has connection, either to a Wi-Fi network or the 4G network from the carrier, then that message will be delivered. And also it takes less connection to send a message back as well, because there's a shorter window of time to connect, to send that message from the application back to your organization. So clicking send from the mobile member app, they can send that picture, they can send their polling response back, they can send their location, and it takes a lot less time and a lot less connection to actually make that pass from the application to your organization.
Great, thank you. So this one I will field to both of you as well. There seems to be a lot of interest in the social media aspect of the solution. Can you talk about the ability of those solutions to bring relevant Twitter information feeds into a GIS dashboard so that you can use the GPS location within Twitter to add to your situational intelligence?
Yeah, I can start with that. We actually have, and some of the images that I was showing you from the Everbridge interface on that Universe tab of the NC4 incidents, we also have a similar function for Twitter. So we actually have a social media monitoring where we can actually monitor Twitter. You can, in your organization, set up those configurable thresholds that we've been talking about and pull in tweets that are relevant to you. So use a keyword, monitor a hashtag, follow a particular username on Twitter, set a radius around a location that you care about, and depending on the settings that you have in your thresholds, we'll monitor those for you and pull those tweets into the Everbridge application, display them on the Universe tab. If those tweets have been geotagged, you can actually see them on the map. So you'll be able to see where those tweets are coming from, plot them on the map, and you can actually display those tweets along with your contact information. So if you have contact records that have geolocations, you can see if something is happening around a location where you have people that live around there, or you have workers around that location. You have office buildings or distribution centers around a location where there's a lot of Twitter activity. And additionally, you can plot the NC4 incident as well. So you can take the geographical information from NC4, plot that on the map, also plot the Twitter, the tweets on the map as well, and you can really get a good idea of what's happening in your universe and get an understanding of what's impacting the locations and the people that you care about.
Yeah, I think from the NC4 side, I don't really have a lot to add to that answer. The social media monitoring that we do is not, we don't make it available customer facing except as a part of the analysis and content that we produce. So we're not putting out that raw feed information, but what we are taking in, and analyzing and making part of our own incident monitoring and incident reporting, it is geocoded and it's delivered directly into the Risk Center interface and by extension straight through to the Everbridge universe in many cases.
Yeah, and so together with using those NC4 incidents and this also goes back to the other question about relevancy of the Twitter information. How do you make sure that you're getting information that actually matters? Well, you know that the NC4 information is already being vetted. They're doing that filtering there before they send out their incident. So you know that it's a trusted source because NC4 has trusted sources. And so when you see that information together with the tweets that are coming from a particular area, with the NC4 incident that is a trusted source, and they'll tell you, if it's, so you can definitely understand whether or not it's confirmed or not from NC4. So you know the quality of that information that's coming from NC4, along with displaying those tweets on the map, along with the information that you're getting from your your contacts themselves, sending you their location from the mobile member application. So all of those things together really work to help you get that understanding.
Great, and I think we probably have time for maybe one more question. So I've seen this one come up a few times, and I'm not surprised because I think we see this in every webinar. Megan, could you go over the Z330 rule again?
Absolutely. So it's the 3-3-30 really helps you remember this, right? So it's three points within 3 sentences, brief sentences, and the first 30 words. So you want to make sure that you get your 3 points across, the 3 main points that you want to make. You know, where is the incident taking place, perhaps? How is it impacting the person, and instructions on what you want them to do. You know, there's a active shooter, and it's in this location, and we need you to shelter in place. And people have short attention spans sometimes, or sometimes the information is so urgent that you need them to react right away. And so if that information is concise up front, and you know, within those first 30 words, then the people that are receiving that message are going to be able to understand and respond to that message much faster. They're going to be able to ingest that information and then take action on it that much faster if your messages are precise following that 3-3-30 rule.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm very sorry to announce that we have run out of time. Thank you, Eric and Megan, for a great session, and to all of our attendees who were able to join us today. If you missed any part of the webinar, be sure to look for the slides on everbridge.com/blog. Those will be available in the next few days. And you will also receive an email with a link to both the recording and the slides in the coming days. If you haven't already, please take a moment to follow us on Twitter at @Everbridge and join our group on LinkedIn, Everbridge Incident Management and Emergency Notification Professionals. For those of you interested in requesting a demo of the new Everbridge system, please visit everbridge.com/request-demo. Thank you all again for your participation in today's Expert Insights webinar, Identifying and Responding to Threats Using Risk Assessment to Improve Resiliency. And we hope to see you online again soon. Thank you so much. Have a great day.